I'm going to start the recording. Yay, I remember to do that. And welcome everyone to this session. This is a longer workshop session. So in this, we're going to get a little bit hands-on. It's just not going to be me and Angel talking to you. You'll be able to jump in, do some making, do some thinking and brainstorming, even some writing. And so if you prefer to write kind of longhand, grab a piece of paper or something to write on, or open a doc in another tab. And we're really glad to be here with you. And I hope you had a wonderful lunch. Thanks to those who are introducing themselves in the chat. Really appreciate that. Even though we're all SFUSD, it's nice to see where everyone is from, what you teach, and what you like to do with yourself. So please go ahead if you haven't yet signed in for today. You probably already have, so I'm not going to linger too much on the slide. But if you haven't signed in, here is the sign in. If you did it anytime this morning, you are good to go. So that's great. And that is something that's important to do. And Digital District Day is what you are attending. My name is Rachel Robertson, and I am KQED's Humanities Professional Learning Lead. Before I was at KQED, which I've been at for about 6 years now, I was a middle school humanities core teacher for many, many years, both here in the Bay, overseas, and in Texas. And I am joined by my STEM colleague, Angel. Angel?
Hey folks, my name is Angel Valerio. I am, Rachel's STEM counterpart. Previous to working at KQED, I was a life science high school teacher across the Bay in OUSD for many years, and also an instructional coach. So happy to be here. Happy to get to know y'all in the chat. Hopefully there are some STEM folks that are here, because what we're presenting today is truly interdisciplinary. So happy to be here.
Awesome. And definitely keep introducing yourself in the chat already. I've seen some science teachers, arts, some paras. Welcome everyone. We're so glad that you're here, and we're hoping that you take ideas from this back to your classroom, because we know school's starting soon. You all know what KQED is. We're the public media station here in the Bay. And all of these, if you have the slides, I know a lot of you are already in the slides, are live links to all of the free resources we have for educators. We have a whole department that really is dedicated to serving you and your students. We do that in a bunch of different ways, so check them out. This side of the slide, so like the left kind of slide if you're looking at it, is all of our professional learning opportunities for teachers. So free courses around media literacy and media production. And then we have a certification with PBS where you can then build those skills and show your leadership in that space. On this side of the screen is for students. So KQED Learn is our site for middle and high school students to create media, publish it, share it widely beyond your classroom, and connect with youth around the country around issues that matter to them. And then PBS Learning Media is public media, like writ large, their vast, vast library of resources for classrooms, PK through 12 in all content areas. So again, all of these on the slides are live links. Just like click in and explore at your leisure. Everything is free, and everything is really focused on helping students develop their voices, engage in dialogue, share their own stories, and show what they're learning to the world, which is what we want them to be able to do when they're with us. So our goals for this session are really around exploring and creating. And then of course, with school starting next week, definitely also reflecting on how this works in your context. We are really pretty focused on kind of putting it all out there, and really welcome you to take what makes sense for you and make it work. Pay attention to what you're excited about. Pay attention to what you think students will be excited about, as we talk about audio storytelling specifically as a way to elevate youth voice around civic issues. And then we're going to do some podcasting ourselves. I know that there's some people here who have worked with us before. So this might be somewhat familiar in terms of the making, but you just never can have too much practice making media. So definitely when we get to the creation part, take that and work with it in the way that makes sense for your level. And then we'll be reflecting on how students can share their voice with a wider world. So we're going to talk about podcasting and audio storytelling sort of generally. And we're going to do that by listening to an audio piece created by a young person here in Northern California around an issue that matters to her. And as we listen to this piece, this is going to be our guiding question. What is the strength of this piece as an audio piece, as a piece of audio, as opposed to if you read it as an essay or maybe saw it as a video? What is the strength of this as an audio? So be thinking about that, maybe preparing your answer as we listen to this piece.
We hear the words climate change all the time, on the news, during debates. For many people, it's faded into the background of life, softened into something too far in the future to have any effect. But if we're looking at the facts, that's not the truth. We see the effects of climate change every day. For example, as the climate becomes hotter, the snowpack decreases. Growing up in California, this relationship between climate and water has always been clear to me. The state has been in drought over half of my life. And it's not just rain that's affected by climate change. According to the EPA, rising temperatures are increasing the number of and severity of wildfires. In 2018 alone, over 870,000 acres of land were burned in California. Last year, I remember I walked outside and the sky was ash gray. The sun a pale orange circle just visible through the haze. This stunned me, because in my little coastal town, the air always seems clean and filled with the scents of the redwood forests in our hills and the Pacific Ocean at our shore. I'm scared of what the world will be like when I'm an adult. And if I'm thinking that now, what about when the next generation are adults? What about the generation after that? Because of this, I feel we have a duty, not just to today's world, but to all future generations on Earth, to work hard to solve this huge problem we've created. Climate change can't be ignored. I mean, global temperature has risen 1.9 degrees Fahrenheit since 1880. This year I've marched down streets filled with children carrying signs saying climate justice now, and been to rallies where students of all ages have spoken passionately about why we need to do something about climate change. The thing is, the youth can and will make an impact, but nothing will really change unless those who have the power of voting elect those who will work hard for us all. We need leaders who will, in the words of the preamble to the Constitution, establish justice, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, by ensuring that someday our posterity has a chance to live in a world where no one has to worry about smoke-colored skies or drought.
All right, so as you process this piece and what we heard, I invite you to take a minute to do that, and then drop in the chat or feel free to uncover your mic and share out loud. What was the strength of this piece as audio? Bernilda writes, you can hear the urgency in her voice, right? Connecting with her actual voice is as powerful as audio. We know what she sounds like. Diana agrees, the emotion came through. So on the page, you can choose words, right, to convey your emotions, but hearing that definitely makes us connect to what she was saying. What else came to mind? Daniel writes, I can hear her emotion when talking about climate change. So her connection with the issue and the emotion that she conveys is an important connection, Daniel's pointing out. What else? Sarah writes, the use of descriptive language to pull us in and let us see what she is saying, right? So no pictures, but she uses those words to draw us in. Marianne writes, you got to focus on really listening and use the imagination to picture what she is describing. Excellent. Cynthia writes, background sounds that match with what she was saying into another place and situation, right? So we have the words, and then we have the audioscape, the soundscape that helps us make those connections and maybe spark our imagination, like what Marianne was saying. Joseph writes, sound effects juxtaposed with her voice strengthens the message. So the sound effects bring us into the piece, her voice and the emotion, her voice and the expression in her voice bring us into the piece. And the way that she uses sounds to connect us with what she's saying brings us into the piece. Wonderful, excellent. So thinking about this piece as a youth-created example of sharing civic voice or sharing a voice about a civic issue, a current issue that really matters to the student, you can see the strength that comes with being able to hear her voice and then being able to understand better and connect with what she's saying around climate change. And this connects with a lot of things that we think about. And when we think about bringing podcasting and audio storytelling into our classes, this empathy and creativity and how it connects with civic engagement is something that you all brought up and is something that we also really think about. So Rachel Martin, one of the hosts of NPR's Morning Edition, says, "I firmly believe with every ounce of my soul that the way forward for our country, our common humanity, is to try to understand the experience of others." And so we came away from Grace's piece really understanding how she felt about it, and maybe feeling also some of her urgency and the way that she connected us to the issue. We might have already felt that urgency, and if we did, it also gave us an opportunity to connect our urgency to hers. Podcasting projects really do align. Just take a kind of a step back from that piece and just think more writ large around, centering learners and their experience and the best practices that we know around those. And I know that SFUSD has done so much over the years to really focus on learner-centered design and deeper learning, and try to make sure that we are in everything we do connecting to the lived experience of our students and opening space for them to bring themselves into the classroom. And so podcasting offers an engaging way for teachers to merge project-based learning with digital media analysis and production skills. And then finally, podcasting, does strengthen both those traditional literacy skills and media literacy skills. So I think it was Cynthia, it might've been someone else talking about, who was it? Oh no, Sarah, talking about descriptive language and the use of those really maybe traditional writing skills, but also sort of melding them with digital production and how that strengthened both. And so Nate Bowling, who is the 2016 Washington State Teacher of the Year, shared this on Twitter, and I just love it. This is your annual reminder that you can get students to write the longest, most detailed essays of their lives if you disguise it as the script for a video or podcast. And I always say it's not about fooling the youth. We don't want to like put one over on them, but it's really about opening a space for them to express themselves by allowing them to share their voice in a way that's meaningful for them, and what kind of happens as a result when we open that space for them to do that. So things to kind of be thinking about. And now we love you to weigh in. So let's just drop in the chat. Which of these kind of reasons for bringing audio production or audio storytelling into your classroom setting do you most connect with? So drop a number 1 if it's audio projects encourage empathy, creativity, creative expression, and civic engagement. Drop a 2 if you're thinking more about like learning-centered best practices. Drop a 3 if you're like, oh, but the traditional and media literacy combined, that's what's really got me going. So locate yourself somewhere in this. And you can, of course, choose more than one if you can't decide. Awesome. Great. So lots of 1s thinking about that expression and civic engagement. Lots of 3s, legitimately and importantly, thinking about how to bring traditional literacy and media literacy together. Both are very important. Diana just writes literary support and development, which is also really important. So great, definitely weigh in, because this also kind of, you can locate yourself and what you'll be sort of bringing into the rest of our time together around what makes sense for your context and your students. Awesome, great job with that. I'm going to hand it over to Angel really quickly, who's going to talk about some ways to share this beyond the classroom if you choose.
Awesome. Thanks, Rachel. So at KQED, we have 7 youth media challenges. And in all of these challenges, what youth do is they create media to communicate their ideas, their perspectives. And in particular, if you're wanting to do more civic action, we have our newest youth media challenge, which is Call for Change. It is new to this school year. So if you were familiar with KQED resources and youth media challenges, this is hot off the presses. And our youth media challenges are focused for middle and high school students. The main reason for that is because of student privacy, because at the end of creating media, we would love for your youth and your students to uplift their voice more and outside of your classroom by publishing on our KQED Youth Media Showcase. And so the process for creating media is this. Your students would choose a topic or an issue that matters to them. It can be local, national, global. So Grace talked about climate change, which is a global issue, but then she talked about it specifically in her environment in Santa Cruz in Northern California. They will write a persuasive commentary about the issue. So we'll talk a little bit about that genre in a bit, but as you heard with Grace's example, there was personal experience mixed with research-based evidence in her audio piece. Then they can create a podcast, which is what we're going to focus on today, but they also can create a video if they choose about focused on that written commentary, and then they would publish that on our showcase, which I think Rachel was pulling up to show what it looks like. So we have youth published to our showcase from all across the nation. So we think it's a really awesome tool to have your students also go through and see what other students in Texas or in Hawaii or in Florida are saying about similar issues. So you can see different multiple perspectives. But essentially, when your students submit to the showcase, they now have this page with their work that you can share out to honestly whoever you want. And so our Call for Change Challenge is open for the school year through June. It's rolling submission, so there's no specific due date other than it's during this school year. And then, like I said, the commentary is really centered on the student voice and what they're the issues that they're passionate about, connecting both personal and community connections also with evidence. The curriculum that we have is completely modifiable. It's all on Google Docs. So you can make and modify as best as you need because you know your students the most at the end of the day. And I really want to emphasize that it's a challenge, it's not a contest. So any student who is middle or high school who wants their work and wants their voice to be shared and published to the Youth Media Showcase will. So that's pretty awesome. And then because all of you are SFUSD teachers and KQED is your local public media station, we do have opportunities to elevate and uplift youth voice even more onto broadcast, excuse me, on radio or digitally, depending on the different news stories and the different projects that we have going on at KQED org-wide. So that's a great opportunity too. This is just the roadmap that we'll go through a little bit today, but the project roadmap that you might do with your students. So you would have them explore the prompt, analyze examples. So like what we did, we analyzed Grace's example. And then what we're going to get into next is choosing a topic or an issue that you feel passionate about, that you would like change for. And then you would do some research or write a script. Ideally, if you're in the classroom, you would have some peer revision baked in there. So students are constantly revising and iterating. And then you'll record the script and go into the audio production part, which we will do a little bit today too, where you're going to edit your audio. Also a good opportunity to get feedback and revision there. And then finally, once you have completed your piece, then you would publish it onto our Youth Media Challenge site. And we do recognize though, that maybe not all youth want their voice on the internet, but we do highly encourage you to think about how you can share your student voices, so you are not the only person that listens to their pieces, right? And so these are just other ways that you might be able to share with your school community or greater than that. And so these are just some ideas. So if your school has a newscast or a newspaper or social media channel, then you can have your student share their voice that way. If the particular issue is related to schooling and education and they want to share it with admin or the superintendent and the school board, you can share it that way too. So these are just some ways that they can further uplift their voices, not where it's not just on the showcase.
Awesome. And you saw in the chat, I was answering Cynthia's question about length limit and bilingual. Absolutely, multiple languages are celebrated and encouraged. And there's technically no length limit, and that's okay. But just as a best practice, especially in terms of when you think about, what's the length of an average news story, or what's the length of a news article where folks are trying to communicate something about an issue that matters to them, or the average length of an op-ed piece or letter to the editor. 2 to 3 minutes, 1 to 3 minutes is pretty standard. And it might be something, especially at the beginning, a good length limit to shoot for this. Great, keep those questions coming, absolutely. So if we're talking about asking students to share their voices as a change maker, we want to locate that and what that means to ask someone to do that. And we saw how Grace did it. So we're going to sort of back up a little bit and think, how did Grace get from an idea or a passion around an issue to the piece that you heard just a few minutes ago? And so when we think about persuasive commentary, and again, I mentioned op-eds, letters to the editor, we're thinking about joining a conversation that's sort of going on in the public square. So issues that folks are already talking about, or things that students may have heard and connected with, or things that they might already be passionate about for whatever reason. And we talk about an issue, we really mean any issue. It does not have to be global in scope, although Grace did choose a global issue, but she really localized it to her own community. It could also be a very local issue, a school-based issue, a school district issue, a community issue, a neighborhood issue, any kind of issue that students are feeling connected with. And so this personal connection, as you see on the right, is really important. And that sort of underlying kind of guiding questions about that are, why does this issue speak to me, right? Like, why do I want to share my voice about an issue? Why does it matter? And if we think about our own lives, which you will be asked to do soon, so you can get started thinking about that, what issues come to mind for you when you think about what issues matter to me and why do they matter to me? Out of all the issues in the world that we could be passionate about, we are more passionate about some than others. Why is that? What personal connections do we have in our lives, our history, our story, our family story that connects us to that issue? And asking students to think about that, again, helps them bring themselves into the classroom in whatever way they want, and also helps them think, okay, where am I going to focus my attention? Where do I want to focus my voice? And then we want them to say, to kind of bring in some more evidence, like their personal evidence is evidence, right? In this type of writing, your own personal experience does count as evidence, but we also want to bring in some other evidence. And the question that kind of underlines that is, how is this change important beyond me, right? What makes me a credible voice? Why should you care, even though you're not me and don't share my experience? So what kinds of evidence do I want to bring in to make that matter? And then this genre of writing is also created explicitly with an audience in mind and with advocacy in mind. That's why we call it the Call for Change Challenge, because we want students to be advocating for something to a specific audience. And so the question here is, how can my voice make a difference? And then who needs to hear my voice with this? So when we talked about, that chart where, once students publish the showcase and they get that individual URL, right, where else are they going to send it? Who else needs to hear it? And if many students within a classroom or community are raising their voice about the same issue, what's the power in that versus maybe doing something that maybe people don't know about and maybe they need to learn more about, right? So there's different ways to approach how you might choose your issue and what audience you might point it to. But knowing that going in is also part of beginning this process. So here are some questions from our friends at Facing History and ourselves that I really like. Both Angel and I really connected with these because I think it's important when you're talking about, one, sharing something, a personal connection, two, raising your voice about something you care about, and three, aiming it at a certain audience or community or wanting it to be out there and reach others. It's important to kind of think about how much you want to participate and what that means to you. And so the questions like, why does it matter? We've kind of gone over that, but how much should I share? Grace shared something that she had experienced firsthand. She didn't share something super personal about her life, although she could have, she didn't. She chose something that maybe was a more common experience that she experienced, but others may have as well, right? There's lots of different ways to share about a connection to an issue. And so asking students and making sure that they know that their personal connection can kind of run the whole gamut from highly personal, which we know can be very powerful, to just, something a little less personal, but something more universal, which we can all relate to, right? So that's a conversation that is good to have going into this process. And then how do I make it more about myself, right? Like some of that is bringing in evidence, outside evidence to kind of make your case. And then part of that is also maybe deciding to share it more broadly so other people can benefit from your learning or your experience. And then these are all sorts of questions, but the one that also stands out kind of at the end is, are we doing this to be influential? Are we doing it to draw attention to ourselves? Are we doing it to join our voices to other voices? Sort of locating yourself into the question of why you're sharing and why is important. And then how do we get from voice to change? So sharing your voice is one step of participatory politics and transforming our world. There might be other steps. There might be steps that students maybe think about and talk about in your classroom. There might be steps that you decide as a class to take or as a school to take. There's no sort of require or right answer. It's just something to consider as these issues are coming up. I'm going to pause here because this is a lot to kind of digest, but I also want to open it up to see if other folks had either other questions like this that are coming to mind that maybe should be on this list that aren't, or other things that are sort of top of mind as you're hearing this and kind of thinking about how this would work in your setting. You can drop in the chat or unmute and share. All right, and if you're the person that just popped in to complete silence, we're going over these questions, and we'll drop a link to the slides in the chat for you. Welcome. All right, so even if you aren't kind of ready yet to share maybe what you're thinking, just keep percolating, keep thinking through things, and definitely drop those in as they come to you, because we can all benefit from everything that everyone is bringing into the space. So some students will come to you and be like, this is my issue 100%. And that's great because they're going to take that issue and run with it. Other students will be like, I don't know. And sometimes it depends on the age of the student and sometimes it doesn't. So it doesn't matter if you have, 7th graders or 10th graders. Sometimes, students need more resources for choosing topics and really deciding on what works for you. So on the left here are just some links out to resources. KQED's Above the Noise is a great resource to think about topics and to get like a little bite-sized chunk of one. The New York Times Learning Network is a great resource for just, again, like what's in the news? What are people talking about? Facing History and Ourselves is another great one. And then these are even more student examples, many of them from SFUSD, where students have taken a position on something. And some of them are very local, like the yard at school and how it should not be trashed. And some are more sort of statewide, maybe. And then some are more global in scope. So these are just some examples from the showcase or for other resources on KQED. But there are lots of other examples of ways that you might want to move from local to global. And there's also a student that was really advocating for themselves and their own mental health. And that's something that might be an approach that some students might be that want to take. This one is an interesting one. This links a personal family history to Asian American hate crimes that have increased so much since COVID. So this one kind of like spans both the self and community and a global issue or a national issue, whereas some of them kind of go all around. So you can kind of guide that as you will. Marianne just dropped a really great question from before into the chat. What is something new or different that I can add to this topic? That's a great thing to think about. How can I make my voice stand out? One of the biggest ways is just by being themselves, right? And like adding their own experience to the conversation. But it's good to think about other ways that they can add to a conversation and why they might want to choose it. So awesome job. Thank you for dropping in that question. Keep those coming. All right, so with all of this in mind, we at KQED are super fans of the Learn by Doing model. And one of the things that we encourage you to do before you do a project like this, or in fact, any media project at all, whether it's a youth media challenge or something else, is to make a model yourself and to go through the entire process from idea selection to scripting to creating, because going through that process yourself, one, will give you confidence if you're a little unsure, and kind of strengthen how you feel about facilitating that with students. But it will also help you kind of see where your students might fall, stumble, see some pitfalls that might come up, smooth the road a little bit like we do. But it's interesting in terms of when you're asking them to do something like scripting or like sound design, that when you go through it, then you can go back to your model and kind of pop out each of those stages, right? So it's not like you're making a model and you're going to show them your finished product and say like, okay, kids, we're going to be doing this, and here's my finished product, and be like, go do it. At every step of the way, you can say, well, this is my script, and this is how I started my script, and this is how I revised my script once I realized that once I started reading it out loud, it was those sentences were really long, kind of chunky, and I couldn't keep track, right? So you'll show them your script and kind of talk through that process. When you're choosing sounds, you're going to talk through that process, right? So at every stage, it allows you to sort of be an example and a model for students, kind of every step of the way, which makes them feel more supported, and helps them connect with the project itself. Plus, sometimes it's scary to create things and share them with the world. And if you do the same and kind of take the lead on that too, that could create a space where they feel more comfortable doing that. So we're just gonna jump in and start layering words and sounds. Angel?
Awesome. Yeah, I really love that, Rachel, about making your own model and learning by doing. I also heard a teacher who did a similar thing where he created a podcast and he used his example as the example that his students analyzed, and having his students give him feedback because he knew his podcast was not perfect at all, and having his students kind of pick at his sound choices and his narration and everything, putting him in that vulnerable place, then created the container for students to feel a little bit more safe when they had other peers give revisions or feedback to them as well. So I thought that that was a really cool thing to do. And what's super great about creating podcasts is you can do it in the comfort of your home. You can do it in the comfort of your classroom. Back in the days, in order to create a radio program, you needed your narration and your whole band to do sounds. Maybe you even had a person who was in the back doing some Foley, so making those footsteps or whatever else. But now all of that is nicely packaged in a computer, a laptop, and honestly, even your smartphone. So we just wanted to uplift that. There are a ton of podcasts that are out there. Honestly, any topic that you want to learn more about, there probably is a podcast about, and these are some of our favorites. And so you most likely have listened to podcasts in the past, so you have an idea about what makes a good podcast with the narration, the sound. I would love to know in the chat, what are some other favorite podcasts that you've been listening to? Because that is just great to get some recommendations from folks to see what you are interested in. But some here, New York Times Daily to get some news, This American Life, Serial if you're into crime podcasts, Throughline, etc. So if you have any others that you listen to frequently and that you would love to share, that would be great. Awesome. Sarah says Radiolab. Definitely, I am a Radiolab fan. So good in-depth research on really specific and interesting topics. Diana says Ear Hustle and Snap Judgment. Yes, definitely. I just listened to a Snap Judgment episode about Jay Dilla the other day. Recommend The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Yes, love that science connection as well, and the social justice connections with that. So thanks for sharing. Keep on sharing. So folks could learn about what you like and then also get those recommendations. Rachel says you really can get only Murders in the Building to get really meta. Yeah. So if you watch that show, you know it is a true crime podcast within a podcast show. It's really fun, but definitely you can lean into the podcasting. The digital software that you can get via laptop, Chromebook, on your phone is really what is able to bring the digital studio, the audio studio to you. There are a bunch of different applications you can use, but all of them pretty much do the same thing, right? You can upload audio files that you've recorded yourself into the programs. You can edit those audio files and then layer on multiple tracks. So adding that music, adding the soundscape, adding the sound effects to really add that dynamic touch. You can adjust the volume and add effects. And then a lot of these apps also record directly into it, so you don't need to do all your uploading. Audacity is an application that you download onto your computer, but it's completely free. GarageBand is native to Apple products, so if you have an Apple computer, laptop, or an iPad, GarageBand most likely is on there and you can use that. But Soundtrap is also a wonderful audio editing app that we like to use because it is web-based. So if I think SFUSD is one-to-one Chromebooks to students, and so because you use Chromebooks, then Soundtrap might be the best bet for you if you don't have downloading capabilities. So what we're going to do now is jump into the Learn by Doing model by creating your own podcast, and actually a quick podcast at that. So these are the steps that you will be taking. So first, you're going to choose your issue or your topic that you care about, and definitely think about something that you might already have some information about, right? So if you're choosing a topic that you don't necessarily know too much about, we don't want to get bogged down by the research into that, because you will be writing a quick script that shares why you chose that topic, and also a call to action or your personal connection that you have to that issue. And what we mean by quick script is literally 3 to 5 sentences. It's nothing super long because, like I said, we don't want to get bogged down by the research and the writing. We want you to get into the tool to be able to create your podcast and see how that feels to do the audio editing, which is the next step in creating your mini podcast. So what we're going to do first is share both Rachel and my model podcast that we created, because we also live by the Learn by Doing pedagogy. And so we always like to create our own models so we can make sure that we know what we're doing, and then also practice being vulnerable and practice sharing ourselves. So the first one is Rachel's, I think.
It is. This is going to work.
All right. So the first one is Rachel's. It is about a national issue, and I'm going to let the podcast speak for itself.
I think Congress should pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and protect voting rights for all Americans. This act would reinstate pre-clearance. This means that states with a history of voter discrimination would need federal approval before making changes to their election laws. It would prevent states from enacting laws that many have already passed to make voting harder for voters of color, young voters, and disabled voters. If we don't have voting rights, all of our other rights are at risk. That's why we need legislation to protect voting rights for all Americans.
Awesome. So kudos for Rachel for creating that mini podcast about passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. You can see, actually, she showed what under the hood a podcast looks like. So if you can go back to your model, you can see here that there are multiple layers. The first layer is her narration, followed by her soundscape with the piano as the background music. So really thinking about what tone would you like with your piece, and how can you create a soundscape that is dynamic to make your piece alive and have your audience listen for the whole time and stay engaged. Her piece was only 30 seconds, and I think we'll look at the script in a bit, but I'm pretty sure it was only like 5 or 6 sentences. So what we're asking you to do hopefully isn't that big of a lift. With that, the next podcast example is my example. It is about a local issue. As I said, I was formerly an Oakland Unified School District employee, and this is about school closures in Oakland.
We are here because what? Education is a right. Because what? Education is a right. Because what?
The Oakland Unified School Board needs to listen to its community members and halt the closing of the 11 public schools they've scheduled to close by 2024, including the 3 schools that were closed at the end of this school year. In January of this year, the school board blindsided the community by announcing that they needed to close, merge, or shrink these schools in order to balance their budget. There were many red flags that were raised, as this process to select schools was rushed and there was a lack of meaningful engagement with the school communities and families before and after the announcing of the closure plan. Unsurprisingly, these closures disproportionately hurt Black, Brown, and special ed students the most, and will force many families to look to enroll to schools outside of their neighborhoods. This is important because schools are community hubs. The district needs to reevaluate how to maintain their financial health without closing schools and find ways to fund the school communities instead of closing them. If they can't do this, then the Oakland community at large needs to come together to vote in new school board members who will listen to and fight for their constituents. The power is with the community, teachers, students, families, and parents, not with the few school board members that are clearly disconnected with their communities.
Community, teachers, parents, yes, all the parents, make some noise.
All right, so that was my example, a little bit longer than Rachel's because I had a lot to say about these school closures, but these are just examples of how you can create your mini podcast. You can choose any issue that speaks to you that you feel passionate about.
And I just want to point out really quickly, both Angel and mine really focused on the call to action part. And that was a little bit of oversight. We got super passionate, right? So we just like jumped in and started being like, what do we want to change? But with students and with yourself today, you might want to focus or start instead with your personal connection, like Grace did. So we just want to open that up and say our examples were very much like focusing on the call, but ourselves weren't really as much in it. And if we were to do this, the full thing, we would of course include our own stories and our connections to this issue more. But if you want to start with that and you want to start with your connection to the issue, and just focus on that for today, that's totally fine as well.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that. Definitely, we leaned into the call for action because we really want change to happen. I see in the chat here, Joseph had a question. How long did it take to create your podcast? Honestly, the same amount of time that y'all will have, about 30-ish minutes or so. We'll give you, I don't know, 5 to 8 minutes to write a script. Like I said, Rachel's is only like 6 sentences long. And then you record your narration into the audio tool and then you edit it. I mean, we both have experience with Soundtrap, with audio editing. So we might have, autopilot done all the things because we already had a vision of what we wanted our pieces to sound like. It might take longer for you because you really want to choose the best background music that conveys the tone that you want. Or you might want to choose the exact sound effects that you had. Like in my piece, I had gone to many different actions regarding the school closures. And so I had audio from student speakers and from teacher speakers, right? And so I already had that, but if you wanted to, go out into your environment and record, that might have taken a little bit longer. Awesome. And then Diana said, is it okay just for this practice that we pick any topic that is easy, not necessarily an issue to rally on? Yeah, definitely. It does not need to be something that you're going to stand on a soapbox about. We really want you to go through the process of creating. So it could be something easy for you because we really want you to go through all of these steps. So thanks for asking that. All right, so we're going to get to it now. So what you're going to do in these 8 minutes, and we know that that is not a ton of time, so just get through whatever you can, is to choose your issue, your topic. And like we just said, and what Diana asked, it doesn't need to be something that you're super, super, super passionate about. It could be an easy topic for you to write about, and you're going to write a 3 to 5 sentence script. This is Rachel's script here, so you can see the script frame. If guiding questions and sentence starters will help you with that process. And you can see here in the italics what Rachel wrote for hers. So I think that that's it. Definitely add any questions that you have in the chat. We will answer them. Feel free to script however you feel most comfortable. So I'm an analog person, so I have a notebook next to me and I usually script that way. But if it's easier for you to type, you can open up a Google Doc, you can open up your notes app, whatever is best for you.
Yeah, and if you're excited about this project and are considering maybe doing something like this sometime this year, I would encourage you, again, here you are on the spot. Like we said, and Marianne brought up, or sorry, Diana brought up, it doesn't have to be like the perfect issue, but if you do know that you're feeling passionate about an issue and you sort of feel drawn to one, the more you can model, the more you can practice kind of modeling this, even if it's not going to be what you end up sharing, the more this time will sort of kind of sink in. So we definitely invite you to approach it however you want, but also with kind of the meta framework of, what might I want to share with my students? What issue might I want to share with them that I care about, of the many issues you care about, and how might I go about that? So that's something to think about as you're just drafting right now. So I'm going to start the timer. Just a sec, I'm going to start the timer. It's up in the right-hand corner, you can see. And we're going to go quiet, but definitely post in the chat questions as they come up, and some have already come in that we'll answer. And yeah, do some brainstorming, do some writing, write your script as much as you can, and then we'll get creating. We're about halfway through the time. You should just be brainstorming, writing, drafting, doing what makes sense for you. But we definitely recommend getting something down so that you'll have something to record. A little more than 30 seconds left. Again, just get some ideas down. Feel free, if you haven't already, to think through the frame and what might work for you. And we'll get back together in about 30 seconds. All righty, we have had one request to maybe extend the time by a minute. I will do that. So I'm gonna rewind time and we'll have one more minute to get folks' scripts kind of in place and then we'll start again. Thanks for asking for that time. Alrighty, I just want to encourage and say that wherever you are is where you should be at this point. And with any luck, you have some notes or a quick script frame that you can use as the basis for your creation. Again, the whole point of quick podcasts is to have the script part be shrunk. Not that you would shrink it down with students, but for us to shrink the script part so that we can spend more time on the creation part and kind of do some poking around and some getting used to the tool because, you know, that's something that's an important part of creation as well. So I'm going to give a quick demo of Soundtrap. Right now, as SFUSD teachers, you all have access to Soundtrap. So that's the logging in process shouldn't be too difficult, but I will drop that link in a sec. But I just want to give you a demo of kind of what you saw when you saw Angel and my examples. We're going to talk about how to record directly into the tool. So you don't have to record on your phone first and then upload. You can just record directly into the tool, which is a nice feature. Most Audacity, GarageBand, most audio software has that feature. So we're going to learn how to record directly into the tool. And if that's as far as you get today, great. And if you record into the tool and then you have that moment where you're like, my voice actually sounds like that, oh my God. And you take some deep breaths and, you know, move on. And then, so after you have your recording, if there's time, I'll show you how to add music, how to explore the loop library that's built into Soundtrap, how to kind of move loops along the timeline here that you can see, and then how to adjust that sound. So that is going to be a very short demo with some just limited features. There's a lot of more features to explore. Soundtrap has videos, how-tos, all sorts of things that they can help you with. So I'm not going to reinvent that wheel, but I will show you the basics so you can just get started. And again, this is to build confidence and get you excited about how you can create even in the limited time that we have. So I'm going to save what I have in my model. Unlike the Google Suite in Soundtrap, you do have to save. And so that's something that you might have to get kids used to again. You know, those of us who grew up in the olden days know how important saving is, but that's not something that we think about as much anymore. So you do have to save. And then when you log into Soundtrap and you open the page, and you kind of get into your account, you'll find a screen that looks like this. And to start a new project, what you do is you enter the studio. Fancy, it just means start a new project. But lots and lots of other folks, lots of other tools have a similar thing. Start a new project, file new, all that kind of stuff. With Soundtrap, you're going to enter the studio and create a new project. And then you're going to start with your narration. And we really recommend that with students, this is the case as well. So you're going to choose podcast. Since you're not going to make music, you're going to make a podcast. And then, I hope that means sometimes my sound misbehaves, but we'll see if we can troubleshoot that. Are folks seeing my screen? Sometimes when I switch, okay, great. Thank you so much for giving that thumbs up, because sometimes when I switch over to applications, it like disintegrates. So then you get to this screen and you're going to always build your tracks, right? We saw on my example, I had 4 tracks. So the first track is going to be your narration track. And so you're going to put add new track. You can also go here to add new track. Either way, it's the same thing. Add new track, and then you're going to pick your voice because you're going to add a voice track first. And again, with students, that's where you're going to want them to start as well. So you're going to add a voice track. Let's see if it records. It's going to look like this. Whether or not it actually works, we'll see. But you'll be able to start recording. And then once you hit record, you'll be able to record directly into the tool. So make sure the reverb is turned all the way down to 0, or you'll sound like you're recording from the bottom of a well. And I'll just leave this kind of the presets as they are. It's probably the best to just start with that. So I'm going to start recording. Hi, this is a test. San Francisco Digital Day is one of my favorite days of the year. I love interacting with SFUSD teachers and sharing and learning with you. All right, so I just recorded what you just heard into the tool. As you can see, I'm feeling hopeful. It just generated up here. To get rid of this box, there's this very subtle X in the left corner. Again, this is subtle. Everyone's like, how do I get out? It's this very subtle X here. Because you're on Zoom, you're already connected probably to your computer's audio through your headphones. So that's great. If you go to record in a few minutes and have to disconnect to stay in the call, that might kind of mess up your sound. So what I recommend you doing if you're connected like through Bluetooth to your earphones is to find some like manual earphones or to disconnect from your audio and reconnect to Soundtrack. Sometimes that happens when you're both simultaneously on Zoom and trying to record something. But we also all go on mute, so you'll be able to do that. Usually in a workshop, I would put you into your own individual breakout room, but we can't do that with this Zoom events space. So we'll figure it out as we go. But again, I'm going to get out of the recording by hitting this X in the left, and then I see what I've done.
Hi, this is a test. San Francisco Digital Day is one of my favorite days of the year.
Right, so that worked. And I heard my voice, it's clear, it's fine. So I'm going to say, great, this is great. I'm going to save it. And I'm also going to title it all right, so now it has a title. And then I might think about adding some sound. I'm going to go over to here to this loop library button. And oh, good. Joseph's giving some really good advice in the chat about how to do what we just talked about around muting and staying in Zoom. I'm going to go to this button that has the musical note sign and then open the loop library. So Spotify owns Soundtrap. So you can imagine that there are quite a few options for musical clips. The good thing about the loop library and Soundtrap is that all the clips are cleared. So the copyright is not an issue when students get loops from this loop library. So there's like basically thousands and thousands of options. My personal recommendation, and this is what I do when I made my John Lewis piece, is to just kind of think of maybe like the vibe that I want to communicate, and then just not overthink it. Of course, your students will overthink it. Of course, maybe you will overthink it. Music is important to us, but there are so many choices that sometimes it's nice to just be like, what tone do I want? What kind of musical instrument do I want? What kind of beat do I want? And kind of narrow it down a little bit so that you can do some shopping that doesn't take all day. Another thing that you might want to do is give students a limited amount of time in class to shop for music, and then say, like, if you want to continue at home and find that perfect track, do it. But this is the time we have in class. So maybe I want to like investigate some pop tunes. And then, you know, again, there are so many different things. So I also just like to scroll and just be like, what, you know, there's categories, there's different like Atlantis, Flickr Pad 4. Oh, that sounds interesting. Not the tone I want, but that was cool. There's also, you know, like you can just keep scrolling forever. So I might want to be like happy. Here we go. Yes, I like it. So I want to select it. I'm going to just double click on it, and it's going to like generate its own track into my piece. Now you might notice that this is now longer than my narration. That's okay. This playhead works like a cursor. So I'm going to put it where I want to cut, just like a cursor. And then I'm going to highlight this track. And you have to like kind of click the heck out of it sometimes. Oh, I don't want that much. It may be too much. And then I'm going to go to edit, split region. This harkens back to the days when tape was like actual physical tape and you would like literally cut it with scissors. And I'm going to split that region. And what it did is it took this region and split it off from the clip. And once it's split off, I can delete it. Let me show you that again. Once it's split off, I can delete it just by clicking and deleting it. And now I have this piece. If I want to like, you know, maybe delete this piece too, yeah, sure. I can do that as well. And so now my music lines up with my narration. Now the music, you know, it's probably too loud. Let's test.
Hi, this is a test.
Yes, that music is way too loud. So over here, I'm going to turn down the volume of the piano. Notice I'm not turning down the volume of this track. I'm just turning down the volume, and I'm just like, it's they kind of make it fancy, but you just click on it and like pull down, right? And so I make it quieter. Let's test it now.
Hi, this is a test.
Okay.
San Francisco.
Maybe I want to make it go up a little bit. You get the idea. So you can futz around there. You can also fade in and out by grabbing these tiny little circles and pulling them this way, or grabbing this tiny little circle up here to do a fade in or a fade out. And again, this is, some preference. You can play around with it, make it work for you. So ideally what you would get done today, if this works for you, let me actually really quickly before. This is where you need to go to access your accounts. So ideally today, what you would do is you would make some media with Oprah, and also you've already written a quick script, yay. You would hit record and record whatever you have piece of your script that you have. And I showed you how to do that, but if you want to put the slides into display mode on your end, and you click here because you forgot how to do that, if you click on the help, it'll take you to a slide that shows you step by step how to do that if you have forgotten, because my demo was lightning quick. And then if you want to edit your narration, I didn't actually do that, but if you want to like split clips and delete things and move things around, you can do that. And if you forget how, there's a nice screencast where I show you how again. And then you can add a track. Again, if you forget how, you're like, oh, here's the loop library. That's right. And you can go down that huge rabbit hole. And then you can fade in and out, adjust the volume, play around as you see fit. At the end, it would be really cool if you share whatever you have by making sharing a link, kind of like what Angel and I did. How you do that, I'm going to show you really quickly. And there, again, there's a help slide around that. How you do that is you exit your studio. Oh, yes. Oh, wait, I don't want to exit this one. Yeah. I want to save, and then you're going to exit your studio and come back to your project. This might be your only project, you might have more. And then you're going to go to this 3-dot menu over here, and you're going to say share a copy. Don't share within the studio, because then I'll become a collaborator on your piece, which is fine. I mean, I'm down, but like you might not want me to be. So exit your studio, go to these 3 dots and go to share copy. And then you're going to agree, of course, and create a copy that you can then share the link to. And that's what Angel and I did to show you our examples just now. All right, so we have 20 minutes. We go until 3:15, so if we need to extend the time, we can a little bit. But let's see how much we can get. Sorry, I'll do that now. Let's see how much we can get done in 20 minutes. And if you get just halfway through this checklist, that's totally fine. That's exactly where you need to be. I really encourage you to just try. Take this time that you already have dedicated to your learning, jump in, play around, do what we always wish we had time to do during the school year, which is like test something out, see if it works. So again, you're going to log into your account, or if you want to create an educator account using a non-SFUSD email, you can do that if you want, it's up to you. And then you're going to hit record and you're going to go from there. And we're all going to be muted. And so if you have any questions, please post them in the chat, and I will do like interpretive dance / screen share to guide you through what I need to show you if that needs to happen. Okay, happy creating, and I hope we get at least a few folks posting in the share doc at the end. Have fun. Alrighty, we're at time. I hate if I've jumped into someone's recording, but I didn't see any notice in the chat of folks who needed to extend. The good thing is you now have access, you have resources, and you can play around as you have time. But thanks to those of you who have jumped in, and whatever stage you are in this checklist is exactly where you need to be. So congratulations. We do have a few folks in the share doc dropping some links, which is so excited to see. Marianne or Sarah, are you willing to have us hear what you created today? We would love that. You can give your consent in the chat, or you're maybe like next time in the chat, and that's totally fine. But it's great to see folks sharing. That's a big part of media creation, is that opportunity to share. Marianne, thank you. I think it will be more than fine. So as folks are dropping in links, we're going to celebrate and hear Marianne's importance of teenagers' voice and actions. Awesome. And thank you also, Sarah. Here we go. Marianne, do you want to intro this in any way, or should I just hit play?
Just play.
All right.
I think teenagers need to be reminded that their voices and actions are powerful and necessary in our world today.
Excellent job. Please drop your appreciation of Marianne's piece in the chat. I loved the music choice, and I love the message behind the words. Powerful way to start off. Thank you for going first. Sarah has also agreed, so let's open that up. Sure. Okay. This is probably my internet's fault, Sarah, and not yours. Let me try that again. That's not gonna work. My internet's like, it's been a long day. All right, let's hear Sarah's piece. Sarah, do you want to intro it in any way? All right, I'm going to hit play.
In order to foster. My name is Sarah Madison, and today on my podcast, I'm going to be talking about education. I think schools need more hands-on projects in order to foster more holistic learning environments. I think this should be done through project-based assignments. These kinds of assignments encourage students to use their whole brain and engage their many different learning styles in order to create something that is meaningful and impactful. It also encourages them to use their voices, to speak up, and to be a part of the process as a whole. This is especially important as it allows students to be creative individuals while accessing multiple disciplinary skills. It also ensures that they are part of their learning every step of the way, and that they have a product at the end that they can look back on and be proud of. I think that project-based learning should be part of every school.
Awesome. Please drop your appreciations of Sarah's piece into the chat. I love both the passion I heard in your voice, as well as the musical choices to bring us into what you were sharing and out as well. Wonderful, wonderful job. I encourage you, folks are dropping in. We do love to listen to these, and we definitely will hear and celebrate what you were sharing. If you are in the process of dropping that link into the chat, into the share doc, it will get an audience. So thank you, those of you who have shared out. Great. I'm just going to share one more while I have my screen open. To share a link, you're going to leave your studio. So you're going to exit the studio and you're going to go to your list of projects. Mine is vast. Yours might not be as long. And you're going to click the 3-dot menu over here and you're going to go to share a copy. And then you're going to follow the rules. They ask you to, say that, you're not doing anything, and then you're going to hit create copy, and that'll give you a link that you can drop in the share doc. Awesome. Thank you so much for jumping in and sharing. It's always so great to come to this point and to know that we're learning together. So we're going to do a quick check-in as we're wrapping up. I would love to hear from you. Please drop a 1 in the chat if you're feeling pretty good, maybe gained some skills, gotten something that you'll come away with. A 2 if you're like, well, I could see, but not sure, or maybe I'm still, working on it. A 3 if you're just like, no, I need more help, it's not for me. And if you are in the 3 category, my email is at the end of this. And so I recommend that you reaching out, because I really do want to support you in this development. We had 20 minutes. And folks were able to do quite a bit more than maybe you could before this session. So definitely give yourself some props and some grace for jumping in and getting it going. So when it's time to publish and go beyond, we have some links and some slides earlier that we went over, but we also just want to remind you that if you decide to do the call for change, which you can do at any time during the school year, if there's no deadline other than the school year. And to be honest, we'll probably extend something like that beyond as well, because this is a great way for youth to share their voice. Submissions are open and they're accepted. Student work is published as it is submitted. So this is not a contest and we are not gatekeepers. We want your student's voice to be on the showcase. Any language they feel comfortable with, any way that they want to share with the greater world, we welcome that. As part of your submission, students are asked to write a brief artist statement. And so these are the submission requirements. They're asked to write an artist statement that kind of puts their piece in context. It does not have to be long, it can be very brief. And then the audio links that we accept are SoundCloud and a Google Drive file, as long as it's open to everyone can view. If it's not, there is so much sadness, because while you can see it and anyone in SFUSD can see it, youth around the country can't see it if it is closed. So make sure your students open their permissions. The way that they submit is that you create an account on the showcase and students do not create an account. So you get a code that you give to students and then they can submit their piece. You can submit them for them. I mean, if you want to submit for students, you're also able to do that, but that gets really unwieldy if you have any number of students. So once you get that code to give students, they should probably submit on your own. I have some questions. Languages will not be auto-transcribed. And so what happens, we have had bilingual and multilingual submissions on the showcase. There's a place in the submission form that's not required, but is also great to include, to put a transcript. And so sometimes if you can put the English language transcript of the piece, that will help put it in context for the viewer, and that could be run through any translation program. So there is a place to post that transcript. You can also post both transcripts, whatever language is in, as well as English. There's a lot of space to do that. Soundtrap does have transcription. It does not have translation. So Soundtrap will auto-transcribe, but it won't translate that transcription. You'll have to do that sort of off the site, but it will transcribe a selection, Cynthia, of other languages. So if students are speaking Spanish, I think is definitely on there. Arabic is, I think, on there. I think they just got Mandarin, Cantonese, I don't think, not yet. So there's a selection of auto transcription languages that you can definitely select on Soundtrap. Great. Other questions about that? Yeah, so it's a pretty easy process once you get that code, then to share with your students. And then we have a form that they can like pre-fill out so they know kind of how to copy and paste into the form and just submit. And then it's published. So let's talk about Soundtrap. So Diana, you're in this category, and maybe if you're new to the district, you're in this category. I don't know what's going on up there. But if you just created an account on Soundtrap with your district ID and just opened an account, you need to go to this website and type in the code KQED, and you will have Soundtrap for the whole rest of the school year. Now, I have heard, although I don't know it's true, the district, the D-Leafs and stuff might know more about this, but I hear that SFUSD might be losing access to Soundtrap in September. If that is the case, then you will need, and you want to use Soundtrap and claim this code, you can. You just need to use a non-district email to do that. And so I don't really know the particulars, but your D-Leaf might know, the IT department might know. What I do know is that if you've created an account today and started from scratch, if you go to this website right here, oops, that's not what I meant to do. And you go to this website right here and type in KQED, as long as you're logged into Soundtrap, that will convert into the full year. So again, please email me if you have any questions about that, because we can help you connect. You can't claim this code if your district already has a subscription or if you haven't created your own account yet. So you can't just like jump in and just type KQD and magically everything will appear. You do have to create an account to claim the code. And if you already have an account, you can't claim the code because you already have an account. So we'll get that worked out, but that's what I know about the district at this moment in time. So I'm giving you all the information I know. You have access perhaps to more information or people that you can ask about within the district. If you have feedback on the session, I'd love to hear it. The good, the bad, the ugly, it just helps us get better. And we love to work with you and serve you. So I really appreciate the time that you would take to fill out the feedback. There's a QR code here, and then there's a bit.ly down there. I think it's the same for all the sessions today. And then finally, here's my email. Here's Angel's email. There are people on this call that I'm not going to call out because they worked with us before who know firsthand how responsive we truly are. And so I'm not giving you this email to just throw you, to the wolves. I will respond, and Angel will respond. And so if you have questions that come up, need a thought partner, want to talk something through, please reach out. We are definitely here for you. And with that, it's been great to see you all virtually. Thanks for coming and giving it your all, and good luck this year. I hope everything works out well, and all the best to you. I'll stay on a little bit if there's more questions, but otherwise have a wonderful rest of your day.